As far as a sleeper, this is a really small play for me, but like we talked about Oregon State yesterday. What do you guys think about UCLA? That's a team where they've gotten better every single season since Chip Kelly's taken over. And people laugh when I bring up Chip Kelly, but Chip Kelly's been really good. And then people will bring up what they lose. Okay, you lose DTR, but we think Dante Moore is going to be the week 1 starter. That's a 5-star freshman right there. You lose Zach Charbonnet, but you replace him with Carson Steele, who I think is going to be an absolute stud again this season. He has a pet alligator. He's like one of the best stories in college football. At wide receiver, you lose your top 3 pass catchers, but you bring in 3 really good transfers. Kyle Ford from USC, the Sturdivant kid from California. On your offensive line, 126 career starts on your offensive line. And on defense, this is probably Chip Kelly's best defense since he's been at UCLA. 9 starters are back. They were close if you look at the schedule last year, if you go back to being an 11-win team last season. They don't play Washington. They don't play Oregon. They do get Utah, USC, and Oregon State on the road. But I like their win total, and I think UCLA is kind of a sleeping giant, maybe a dark horse contender in the Pac-12. Everybody's going to talk about USC. Look at the back half of their schedule, you guys. What if USC has a couple tough losses? Any chance maybe Caleb Williams makes a business decision? He's going to be the number 1 overall pick. I know he played in that bowl game hurt last year, but that's a different story. He had to come back this season. Maybe he shuts it down. I think Oregon could take a step back. You lose your play caller. You lose Kenny Dillingham. That's the same guy that recruited Bo Nix to Oregon. Bo Nix had his best college career last year with him calling plays. Now he's gone, new play caller. I love Washington, but Michael Penix finally stayed healthy last season. What if that doesn't happen again? I think you can make the case for UCLA. I think sometimes when you're looking at win totals or you're looking at future bets in college football, it's like, they lose Stetson Bennett, or, UCLA loses DTR. You have to look at who they're bringing in, because sometimes you're actually going to upgrade. DTR, he was a hell of a college quarterback. But if you were betting on UCLA every week last season, he's kind of also a nightmare. Dante Moore, unfortunately, we didn't get to see him in the spring game, but the hype's there. What if he ends up being a better quarterback? So I do think that you could find some good value if you look at some of these conferences, and I think UCLA might be a good bet. The knock on Rodgers always is when he finds his go-to guys, his go-to guy sticks with that guy. For years, it was Jordy Nelson. If you go back and you even watch that NFC Championship game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Rodgers just continues in the red zone to force it to Devontae Adams. And I don't really worry about Randall Cobb stealing targets from Garrett Wilson. He's there because he's Rodgers' buddy. He's a good locker room guy. I don't really worry about Allen Lazard stealing targets from Garrett Wilson. I think he'll be pretty big on third downs because of the familiarity, because he's like Rodgers' security blanket at this point. And he's more of he's a really good run blocking wide receiver. But I think Garrett Wilson could have a monster season. You look at the rest of the wide receivers in that room. It's Corey Davis. It's Hardman. I think Garrett Wilson could have a monster year because I think the volume of the targets is going to be there. So I like the receiving yard leader prop for Garrett Wilson, 20-1 this year.
Yeah, I like that process overall. That makes a lot of sense to me. The question to me is how much will Aaron Rodgers kind of go to one of his guys as opposed to going to, say, the best receiver in that group, which could very well be Garrett Wilson. That, to me, is the biggest question. And I don't know if how much of that is just, okay, the Aaron Rodgers personality quirk is something that makes me a little bit nervous. Or maybe this offense just doesn't work. I mean, at some point when you have someone of Rodgers' caliber, Father Time always wins, right? At what point does he sort of fall off the cliff? That is also going to be a big question. And so I think maybe we're in slight disagreement as far as like how sharp that number is. But overall, I do like that process a lot as far as figuring out, who can be the receptions leader, who can win offensive, player of the year. Definitely, I think Wilson is a good bet as far as anything else. One defensive player of the year candidate that I want to throw in your direction. He's 150-1, which I find really surprising because to me he's a name that I think we are aware enough of his ability as a pass rusher and as an edge guy. But I look at this and I say, okay, last season this guy ranked 4th in quarterback pressures. Yeah, there was a downtick in sacks, but often that means there's a positive regression in his future. He's not necessarily competing with any other outside linebackers or defensive tackles for getting home, for accruing sacks. And this is a defense that I think got a lot of people's attention last year and I think can still play at a really high level. And to me, Josh Allen of the Jacksonville Jaguars at 150 to 1 can very well be Defensive Player of the Year. I love the number more than I do anything else, but here is someone who may not be in that same conversation with the other elite edge rushers, but you're talking about a fantastic number for someone who really wasn't that far off from, say, like a Myles Garrett or, a TJ Watt, someone like that, as far as getting those big pressure numbers.
If I'm looking at this market, I want to look at a team where they could struggle out of the gate, right? A quarterback I'm not sold on. A bunch of guys, even on the defensive side of the ball, that are still a big question mark, like a Chase Young. So I was looking at Ron Rivera at 8 to 1, just because new ownership group comes into Washington. Dan Snyder's finally gone. They're gonna want to change things up there, and you got Ron Rivera. You have a new play caller in Washington. But if they get off to a slow start, I could see him being fired in season. Like, there's a couple really interesting prices down the board, different names that we could talk about, but I think that's why you're seeing an 8 to 1 price for Riverboat Ron, because I think there's a realistic shot that that's somebody that would be fired in season. I completely agree. I don't think there's any chance Jerry Jones is firing Mike McCarthy in season. I don't think it gets that bad in Dallas. And even if it did, I think he would wait until after the season, because who are you going to replace him with? I guess Dan Quinn is there. You can make him your interim head coach, but I just don't see it happening.
Maybe okay. Well, first off, on the McCarthy front, I think the Cowboys are going to have a really good year. I like them to win that division. I like them to do big things, and we'll talk about some of our futures later on as far as awards. And there are Cowboys that are going to be in the mix for those. But with that said, I do understand why, because the Cowboys are popular. People look at Jerry Jones, and they're going to bet on McCarthy. Why? Because they don't like McCarthy. They think McCarthy sucks, I think, for the most part. That perception is out there. And now he's the dude. Now, if you're not having a successful offense, it's on him. He can't point to the OC anymore. So I do understand why he's the favorite. There's no way I would bet him. No way. Even if the odds were good, I'm not betting on him for all the points that you guys stated. Now, before even looking at the odds, there are a few names that I wrote down, and then after looking at the odds, I don't love it, but I do think there is a chance that these coaches could be first fired, but I'm not going to bet them because I don't think there's enough value. First name that came to Rivera. Yes, this is going to be his 4th year. New ownership, we know all the reasons. Now, I do like them to go over the win total, but Rivera is going to be on the hot seat to start the season at 7 to 1. I don't think it's worth a play, but I wouldn't hate it if you wanted to bet it.